Imagine being the victim of a violent crime, the fear, the trauma, the desperate need for justice, and then relief. The police tell you they have caught the perpetrator. The court convicts them. You can finally try to move on. But what if years later you're told they got it wrong? The person you believed was guilty is innocent, and the real criminal still free. The justice system didn't just fail the accused, it failed you too. Your search for justice begins all over again. Wrongful convictions don't just ruin the lives of the innocent. They betray the victims who believed justice had been served. Today we are going to explore the hidden consequences of wrongful convictions, the impact on victims, the broken trust, and the real criminals who go unpunished, and society affected as a result too. Welcome to Spoken Injustice, where we put the criminal justice system in the dock. The idea of closure in criminal justice suggests that a legal resolution, such as a conviction for example, offers finality for victims, their families, and the society as a whole. However, when wrongful convictions occur, closure becomes nothing more than an illusion. Instead of bringing relief, it extends the suffering not just for the wrongly convicted and their families, but also for victims, their loved ones, and society as a whole. Let's uncover and dismantle this illusion together. But before we begin, here is a quick reminder to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Our mission is to expose the full perception of a robust and infallible criminal justice system. Illusions persist when left unchallenged, and we aim to break them down using critical thinking, solid evidence, and psychological insight. By presenting verifiable data, expert analysis, and historical cases, we equip you with the tools to question and challenge these deeply rooted misconceptions. For nearly 2 years, we have dedicated ourselves to exposing the devastating impact of wrongful convictions, shedding light on the turmoil they bring to the innocent and their families. We focused on the loss of freedom and time. 16 and a half years for the Birmingham Six. 16 years for Stephen Kesko, 11 years for the Cardiff Newsagent 3, 11 years for Oliver Campbell, 3 years for Sally Clark, 6 years for Donna Anthony, 1.5 years for Angela Cannings, 17 years for Andrew Malkinson, 7 years for Sam Hallam, too many to count collectively for the post office victims. Not to mention the psychological and emotional trauma, social stigma and isolation, challenges of reintegration after release, financial hardship, loss of trust in the justice system, strained and broken relationships. Wrongful convictions do more than take years from an innocent person's life. They leave deep, lasting wounds, many of which never truly heal, even after exoneration. Sally Clark, for instance, never recovered from the trauma of her wrongful conviction, which ultimately led to her untimely death. And the damage doesn't stop there. It spreads, devastating entire families. Sam Hallam, wrongfully convicted of murder in 2005, spent over 7 years in prison before being exonerated in 2012. The toll was unbearable for his father, who tragically took his own life while his son remained behind bars. On the 3rd of October 2010, Terry Hallam was found hanging from a balcony of a flat in Oxton Street by police and was pronounced dead at the scene. Sadly and tragically, the following week, the CCRC revealed it was investigating Sam Hallam's conviction with the view to refer the case to the Court of Appeal. He sadly didn't live to see that. These are compelling arguments that should prompt serious concerns and inspire action towards meaningful reform of the criminal justice system to prevent wrongful convictions. Yet, public interest in wrongful convictions, at least in the UK, remains surprisingly limited. We believe part of the issue lies in the fact that most activists and organizations dedicated to wrongful conviction advocacy have primarily focused on its impact on exonerated individuals and their families. While this is undeniably important, it has inadvertently narrowed public engagement and limited awareness of the broader consequences. By presenting wrongful convictions primarily as affecting only those wrongfully convicted, we risk overlooking their wider societal impact, which includes, amongst other things, the original victim's experience. Victims of crime often believe they have found closure when a conviction is secured. However, when a wrongful conviction is revealed, they may feel betrayed by the justice system, experience renewed trauma, and even struggle with guilt for having identified the wrong person, especially in cases of mistaken eyewitness identification. This emotional toll is rarely discussed in public discourse. Secondly, public safety risks. Most wrongful convictions mean that the actual perpetrator remains free, often continuing to commit crimes. Studies in the US, such as those by the Innocence Project, have shown that real offenders identified after wrongful convictions were responsible for dozens of additional violent crimes, including rapes and murders. This means wrongful convictions are not just about justice for the individual, but also about preventing future victimization. Thirdly, erosion of public trust in the system. The justice system is meant to protect society, but high-profile wrongful convictions expose its failures. When the public sees wrongful convictions as isolated mistakes rather than systemic issues, they may not demand reform, leaving flawed processes unchanged. This lack of broader engagement allows issues like unreliable forensic or expert evidence or eyewitness identifications, etc., to persist. Fourth, and importantly, the financial and social costs. Wrongful convictions waste massive public resources. Police and prosecutors invest time and money in convicting and imprisoning the wrong person while the real perpetrator remains free. And the cost of compensating, exonerating and reinvestigating cases adds another burden on taxpayers. Society also suffers when innocent individuals, often from marginalized communities, lose years of their lives behind bars and struggle to reintegrate upon release. by broadening the conversation to encompass victims, societal risks, and systemic failures that lead to wrongful convictions, we can engage a wider audience in pushing for meaningful reform. These reframing positions wrongful convictions not just as a matter of justice for individuals, but as a pressing issue of public safety and social equity that impacts everyone. Given the significance of this perspective and its potential to reshape public discourse, it is striking that wrongful conviction literature has historically overlooked this critical aspect. A comprehensive study concluded in 2016 by ICF International, titled Understanding the Experiences of the Original Crime Victims, focuses on 11 cases to identify shared experiences and service needs of victims across wrongful convictions scenarios. These research highlighted that victims often face significant emotional and psychological challenges upon learning about a wrongful conviction, including feeling of guilt, betrayal, and confusion. The study emphasized the necessity for tailored support services to address these unique challenges. More recently, Kimberly J. Cook, professor of sociology and criminology at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, published a book, Shattered Justice, which relates to research which draws on 21 in-depth interviews with original crime victims, which include both homicide victims' family members and rape survivors. She develops, in addition to the primary trauma, which relates to the impact of the original crime, and the secondary trauma, which refer to the harms caused by the criminal legal system, an additional theory of trauma coined tertiary trauma. This type of trauma focuses on the re-traumatization stemming from a wrongful conviction. These studies essentially revealed that wrongful convictions do more than destroy innocent lives. They fail the victim of the original crime by letting the real perpetrator walk free. They create a false sense of closure, only to reopen wounds when the truth emerges. Worse still, in certain cases, the real offender remains at large, posing a continuing threat to public safety. Let's return to the scenario we introduced at the beginning of this video. This is not an hypothetical situation. It is a grim reality that has happened before and tragically will happen again. Take the cases of Michael Shirley, Barry White, Stephen Kitsko, Victor Nealon, Andrew Malkinson, each wrongfully convicted of the most serious crimes, rape and murder. Their convictions, once thought to bring closure, were later found to be unsafe. These miscarriages of justice did not just steal years, decades in some cases, from innocent individuals. They also meant that the real perpetrator remained free, unpunished, and potentially able to harm others. In only 2 of these cases was the true offender eventually identified and apprehended, but only after years of injustice had already played out. For the others, justice remains incomplete, with no accountability for the actual crimes committed. This failure is not just an issue for those wrongly convicted. It is a systemic failure that affects victims, their family, and the society as a whole. Wrongful convictions do not just damage individual lives, they allow real criminals to walk free, erode trust in the justice system, and leave lasting scars on all those affected. In a rare and perhaps unprecedented moment, Andrew Malkinson, standing outside the Court of Appeal on the day his conviction was overturned, addressed the original victim in his case. This is what he said.
The person who really did this horrific crime has been at large. And this means that it's not just me who has been denied justice, it is the victim. As this is my only chance to say something to her, please allow me to address her directly. Sitting in my cell, I used to rack my brains as to how you could say you were so sure it was me when I knew it was not. I read all I could and learned about how fraught with risk the process of lineup identification is when someone has been subjected to trauma. I wondered if the police helped you to pick me. Since my release, I have had the privilege of being introduced to an American woman called Jennifer Thompson, a rape survivor who was caught up in a wrongful conviction. And she has helped me at least begin to try and understand what you went through that night and what it has been like for you since. I am so sorry that you were attacked and brutalized that night by that man. I am not the person who attacked you, but what happened to me is not your fault. I'm so sorry if my fight for the truth, as I knew it to be, has caused you extra trauma. I am so sorry that the system has let you down. It let us both down. There are no winners in a wrongful conviction case, with the exception of the real perpetrator. Everyone gets failed, from the original victim to the wrongfully convicted person. I sincerely hope that you are receiving the support you need and the apology from the police that you deserve.
As far as we know, she has not publicly responded. Protected by anonymity, her reaction will most likely remain unknown. But we can reasonably assume that her emotion may mirror those described in research: guilt, betrayal, and deep confusion. To understand this experience further, let's turn to the testimony of Jennifer Thompson, a woman who direct insight into the trauma of a wrongful conviction from a victim's perspective. Malkinson himself referenced her in his speech. We briefly discussed Jennifer Thompson in our video on eyewitness identification. In 1984, at the age of 22, she was a university student when she was raped by an intruder on campus. Determined to survive and ensure her attacker was brought to justice, she memorized every detail of his face. Convinced of her accuracy, she later confidently identified Ronald Cotton as her assailant. However, for 11 years, Cotton maintained his innocence, whilst Thompson was sure she had the right person. Then in 1995, DNA evidence proved he was not the attacker. The realization shattered Thompson.
11 years later, a DNA test was run. And standing in my kitchen on Archer Road in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, they looked at me and they said, "So that DNA, it's not Ronald's. It belongs to a man by the name of Bobby Poole." I fell into a black hole. I was paralyzed by fear. I was paralyzed by guilt for what had happened to Ronald Cotton. I had been on the unknown road, and here I am, and it is a dead end. Ronald is going to be released, and it's celebration for him and his family, of course, as it should be. But for me, the world wanted a pound of flesh from Jennifer Thompson. The world wanted me to apologize for what had happened to Ronald Cotton. The world wanted to find me, they wanted to know me, and they wanted to blame me. And so I did what I thought was the right thing, I became really, really tiny. Because if you can't find me, you can't blame me. And I lived like that for 2 years, and I was suffocating. After 2 years of Ronald being home, I asked for a meeting with him. I wanted to sit in the same space with him. I wanted to ask him questions. He needed to ask me questions. And we sat in a church about 1.5 miles away from where I had been raped those 13 years before, and we began to talk about what we had lost, what we longed for, the trauma, the fear. What was the worst day of your life? Why did you think it was me? And it was in that space with each other that for the first time in 13 years, I started to heal. Those little broken pieces of my soul started finding their way home again.
This system had undeniably failed them both. Thompson's book, Picking Cotton, offers a compelling insight into their experience. For years now, both she and Cotton have been active in raising awareness about wrongful convictions from both the victims and the wrongfully convicted perspective. For many, a conviction provides a sense of closure. Learning years later that the wrong person was convicted can reopen deep wounds, causing self-doubt, emotional distress, and loss of trust in the legal system. Some may develop heightened anxiety, depression, or PTSD, knowing the real perpetrator remains free. Overturning a wrongful conviction often requires victims to participate in legal proceedings, such as appeals or retrials. These forces them to relieve their trauma, sometimes decades later, while also facing the distressing reality that justice was never truly served. Some may fear public scrutiny and backlash, especially if they played a key role in identifying the wrong suspect. One of the gravest outcomes of wrongful convictions is that the actual offender remains at large, free to commit more crimes. A study by the US-based Innocence Project found that the real perpetrator was identified in 39% of the 235 misidentification exonerations. Some of these real perpetrators were subsequently convicted of others' violent crimes, which might have been avoided had the correct perpetrator been apprehended during the original investigation. In all, these perpetrators committed 100 additional violent crimes based on criminal convictions, including 64 sexual assaults, 17 homicides, and 19 other violent crimes. Let that sink in. Wrongful convictions don't just punish the innocent. They delay true justice and put us, the society as a whole, at risk. Similar emotional devastation occurs when wrongful convictions arise from manufactured crimes. Cases where no crime ever took place, yet the justice system constructs a false narrative. We discussed this in more detail in our video, The Art of Forensics. We mentioned in particular the case of Amanda Jenkinson, an ITU nurse wrongfully convicted in 1996 for harming a patient who actually died of natural causes. Her conviction was eventually overturned nearly a decade later. Though we lack testimony from the victims' loved ones, we can only imagine the psychological turmoil they must have endured. First, they were led to believe that a natural passing was in fact the result of foul play. This revelation must have shattered their reality, forcing them into a cycle of grief, anger, and a desperate search for justice. When they later learned that no crime had actually occurred, that their loss was not caused by human hands, but by natural causes, they must have thrusted into a second painful reckoning. The emotional turmoil does not simply reset. Instead, it deepens, leaving them grappling with feeling of betrayal, confusion, and mistrust. Wrongful convictions don't just devastate the individuals directly involved. They have far-reaching consequences for society as a whole. When an innocent person is convicted, public trust in law enforcement and the justice system is severely damaged. The belief the authorities will seek the truth and uphold fairness is shaken, making people more skeptical of criminal investigations, prosecutions, and verdicts. This erosion of confidence can deter victims from coming forward, discourage witnesses from cooperating, and weaken the very institutions meant to protect us. Beyond the damage to trust, wrongful convictions come at a significant financial and societal cost. Police resources, legal proceedings, and taxpayers' money are poured into prosecuting the wrong person, only to be spent again on appeals, reinvestigations, and possible compensation for the wrongly accused. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator may remain free, endangering others and prolonging the suffering of victims who believed justice had been served. The takeaway from this video is simple but urgent. Justice must be pursued with care, scrutiny, and accountability. Preventing wrongful convictions is not just about protecting the innocent. It is about safeguarding the integrity of our entire legal system and ensuring that justice does not create new victims in the process. I hope this discussion has shifted your perspective on wrongful convictions, showing that their impact extends far beyond those wrongly convicted. They affect us all. And what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time as we continue examining the flaws in our criminal justice system. Join us again as we sit and rise in this unique trial.